All right, I'm speaking on heaven once again. I know Edward's excited. A few people are teasing me about it. This is the most complex topic I've ever studied. It is by far different than what I ever expected. There's so many questions that I've expanded upon, but also asked a lot of new ones. I genuinely don't know where to begin on this topic. But probably, I would imagine, by answering your most pressing question, will there be coffee in heaven? Probably. That's honestly my answer is probably. But definitely no Starbucks. Sorry, Yulia. But before I dive in, I want to actually thank Ed for giving me this book called Heaven by Randy Alcorn. It's 500 pages, so that was fun. And it's like every page that you read, you have like 500 additional questions. Because, for example, if we're talking about coffee, will it be in heaven? It's not that simple. Will it have an effect on our resurrected bodies if there's caffeine in our coffee? What do you guys think? Caffeine, what does it do to us? Makes us jittery, it makes us hyper a little bit. It sometimes makes us feel sick. I know it makes me feel sick sometimes. What happens when we drink coffee? And will that happen with our resurrected, perfect bodies, glorified bodies? But then again, we read in Isaiah about wine being in heaven. Will we feel the effect of alcohol in heaven? What do you guys think? Yes and no? How many of you think yes? How many of you think no? How many of you don't know what I'm talking about? Nice. Okay. We know that adverse health effects won't be a thing in heaven, like caffeine addiction, like sinful overindulgence or gluttony, weight problems. And why wouldn't caffeine be a thing? If God makes it here on this earth now, and it's a plant, and it's something we brought out of the earth, why wouldn't it be in heaven? And I'm going to get into why I believe that and why so many other theologians believe that. But the issue that might come out of things like that, like drunkenness or addiction, we know that those things will be gone. They're no longer a factor in what happens. And so I think we actually will feel those sensations just like we do here on earth, but in a different way. So next week, I'm going to get into the nitty-gritty about heaven, like all these kind of questions, because there's so many things like, will there be technology in heaven? Will we have cars? If we have houses in heaven or dwelling places and cities and country, will we have cars in heaven? Or better yet, Ed actually asked me, like, will we travel through space on rocket ships? Because God inherently doesn't think that technology is evil, right? He actually loves our workmanship, our minds creating these things. So then why would he take that away in heaven? Why would he limit the creativity that he's given us? I don't think we're going to be flying and ascending to everyone else's mansions in heaven. I think it's a lot more simplistic than that, which is why this topic is so interesting. But we're in this series called No Middle Ground, where we've heard a lot about hell. And I hope it's had an impact on you, because we are trying to press you toward a decision that there are only two alternatives to your death, your end. There are no backups, no God will change his mind. There's no Uno reverse cards. There's nothing but heaven and hell after our death. And my lesson tonight is simple, although it sounds weird, but I'll get into it. It's called The Assurance of Heaven Through Biblical Reinforcement. And I broke it down into three parts: the getting there, the knowing there, and the looking there. Because we must know how to get to heaven. We must know what there is in heaven. And we must look forward to being in heaven. That is what the Bible calls us to. And most people, when you ask them where they think they will be after death, what do they say? Probably heaven. And if not, if they don't say that, what is the other thing they say? In a milder version of hell. Right? Whether that is just non-existent and no consciousness, no nothing, or that's like an easier version of hell, like not for eternity, not as painful. It's like it's been programmed into us to believe that. Almost like there's a satanic ruler over this present world who lies, attacking the mind and the heart of believers and non-believers alike. What better thing for him to do than to downplay heaven and hell? Heaven is not vague and lifeless. We perceive that to be the case because we have been blinded by an angry devil who has been kicked out of that very place that you are promised and entitled to. And not only that, to make it worse for him, you enter on a basis of faith. And it is a free gift of salvation that Christ has earned by his death and resurrection. And there is a reason that God repeatedly commands us to focus our minds and hearts on the heavenly things, on the kingdom of God. He commands it because it's unnatural for us to think about it, to want it. It's not automatic to us. It's something we must work at. It's the same reason you're not commanded to sleep as much as you want or to shut off your mind toward the needs of others, because that's your natural tendency as a sinful human. Instead, we're commanded to avoid gossip, avoid jealousy. We're commanded to set our minds on heavenly things and not earthly ones. And God uses even our suffering and the inevitability of our death to help unfasten us from this earth and realize that this is not our home, that a greater thing lies beyond it. That at the very most, that you will see it within 100 years. Just recently, I caught myself in these hallways attempting to stop some kids from running in the hallway. And it was the most confusing sensation I've ever felt, because I immediately knew, like, I'm getting old. I have these new instincts. There was a day where I would, instead of telling them to stop, I would run with them and chase them. And this inevitability of my aging is creeping in. And it's a slippery slope from there. Out of nowhere, bones start creaking. You start most sentences with, when I was young. Mailmen know you by your first name, right, Peter? Cashiers call you sir. It's a scary time. And last time I actually talked about what surprised you guys is that there's 150,000 deaths per day. That's about 56 million per year. Your time is limited, and Satan will do anything to convince you that it's just easy cruising from here on out. There's a place in the middle for you, that you will find common ground with others and everything will be okay. C.S. Lewis said this, that the safest road to hell is the gradual one. The gentle slope, soft underfoot, without sudden turnings, without milestones, without signposts. Do you guys remember COVID? In the early stages, I remember my coworker said, hey man, there's like 20,000 cases of COVID. We should really be worried about this. And I remember I audibly laughed because I was like, COVID, what is that? They warned us about Ebola and things like that. And I remember it was such a bizarre thing. And then in a matter of weeks, our entire world changed. Now picture that right now. I told you that there's a new disease in Greenland that's coming that's going to be worse than coronavirus. I know I sound like a YouTube ad, but what would happen in our streets, in our stores, in your families? There would be panic. There would be rumors. Toilet paper would be gone. People would be talking about it. But then I tell you that Christ is coming back. Not with peace, but a sword to divide and sever. Waging a war between good and evil against the Antichrist and the children of the devil. But we almost never talk about it. We don't prepare for that one. We'll deal with it as it comes. It is shocking how little we talk about heaven. And what's filled that void is a flood of unbiblical thinking that we get from false teachers and a malnourished mind and malnourished imaginations because we're not full of the Word of God. And so we draw our references about heaven and everything else through what the culture says. You cannot assume that you are going to heaven. And so anything I share to you about heaven does not entitle you to it. That you have a decision to make. And Jesus made it clear that small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life. And only a few find it. And so I ask you to not play with chance. And Randy was saying, don't cross your fingers and blindly hope that yours is a name written in the book of life. He adamantly says that we can know and we should know before we die if we are destined for heaven or hell. It is the devil who wants you to flirt with the middle ground. He has jumbled every religion known to man to sound appealing, related to one another, like they all end in the same place, that they're even reasonable. Furthermore, by minimizing the sting of hell, we also minimize the glory of heaven. He says in his book, Satan has obvious motives for fueling our denial of eternal punishment. He wants, one, unbelievers to reject Christ without fear. Two, he wants Christians to be unmotivated to share Christ. And three, he wants God to receive less glory for the radical nature of his redemptive work. It is not civilized to deny hell. It is even Jesus, who is the most loving and compassionate person, who did not deny hell, but taught and warned about it. So, I ask you to pause. There's this tombstone in Indiana somewhere. These words really made me stop and think. On this tombstone, it says, "Pause, stranger, when you pass me by. As you are now, so once was I. As I am now, so you will be. So prepare for death and follow me." It's kind of morbid, right? Years later, some person etched into this tombstone to say, "To follow you, I'm not content until I know which way you went." Well, think about your tombstone. If there's anything to put on it that's cool and makes a statement, it's that. But there must be an assurance for your life. 1 John 5:13 says, "I write these things to you who believe in the name of the Son of God, so that you may know that you have eternal life." It's not guesswork. You don't accidentally end up there. There has to be assurance, evidence, understanding. That's why Paul was so adamant when he warned people, the ones he discipled, he said, "Examine yourself, test your faith." And the writers at GodQuestions.org put it really well. They said, "We should find the assurance of our salvation in the objective truth of God's word. We should have confident trust that we are saved based on the promises God has declared, not because of our subjective experiences." Where he's saying it's not because of where you are in the church, it's not because the gifts you have or the heavenly songs you sing. Nothing subjective, just objectively, have you believed and followed Christ? Have you studied his word and examined your life through it? Is there an evidence that he is sanctifying and working in your heart? Where you were once a being that loved sin, are you growing in your fight against it? There's only one way into heaven, and it is the most uncomfortable truth of the Bible. There's no middle path to heaven. Either you are a follower of Jesus or you are not. He said in Luke 11, "He who is not with me is against me. I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." So, part one, how do we get to heaven? One way, nothing else. Part two, the assurance of heaven through biblical reinforcement. If we talked about getting there, let's talk about the knowing there. It seems like we're even asking the wrong question here. The question is a good one. What way does life end for you? It's a good start. But more, and what's more interesting to me, is asking, what way does eternity begin for you? Not how does your life end here? How does eternity begin for you? It's a different perspective, though it's very marginal. If a non-believer asks you to describe heaven right now, to make a little list for them, what would you say about heaven? I'm not going to look ahead. There's a million things I know you want to write on that paper. What would we say about heaven? How many of you would scramble for words? Or would it pour out of your heart? Randy continued in his book saying, Satan need not convince us that heaven doesn't exist. He need only to convince us that it is a boring place, robbing us of joy and anticipation, leading us to set our minds on this life, making the best of our current existence, and never motivated to share the good news that people can spend eternity in a boring, ghostly place that even we're not looking forward to. Again, we've been blinded by sin. We make heaven a secondary home, a vacation spot for ourselves, a place where we might be able to indulge in our most earthly desires and in a superior way. It's all it is. But God didn't create heaven with average in mind. He didn't make it as a middle project, as if earth was top tier and this is just some secondary place. In fact, all of God's creation is working and building toward only this: eternity with his children, filled with his glory. All the faculty of his mind and creation he is putting together for this moment, that after the great white judgment, he will spend eternity with the ones he loves. So I don't think he's going to take it lightly. If God's victory was not partial in any way, nor will his reward be. Too many people put this vague blanket over heaven and dismiss it with this idea that it's beyond our imagination. And it's a good thing. Like, I love the song, what is it? I Can Only Imagine. Like, will I stand there in shock? Will I dance and be ridiculed? I don't know how I'll be in heaven. I can only imagine. There's a good nugget to that, but it is not what believers are meant to do. We are to explore what God has written in the Word about heaven. One thing you can maybe imagine is if Elon Musk commercialized voyages to Mars, and people all around the world were ready to go. It takes like a year of training or something like that. And then we're all strapped in our little rocket going to Mars, and we look at each other and we ask, dude, do you know anything about Mars? Like, what are we going to do there? How are we going to breathe? Like, what language? Well, I don't know. You would have questions. You'd be excited. It's a new world, but yet familiar in so many ways. And that's what heaven is. It'll be so much like earth. And again, I'm getting to that. I'm just bad at it. But it's really a bizarre thing to be like, we're preparing as Christians for this one thing with Christ for eternity, the place where we'll spend the rest of our lives, but we know nothing about it. We don't talk about it. We barely sing about it. I think Nellie struggled to find enough songs for this, but she did a good job. But I honestly was struggling to find songs on heaven. It's weird. Prepare for it in your heart. Have expectations. Know what to say when a non-believer asks you. And if you don't, you can never look forward to heaven. Because it's this vague, empty thing that you know nothing about. And the theme of this book was how are you supposed to be excited if you don't know what God has in store for you? How many times I've heard Christians say dude, heaven's going to be so boring. Because all we're going to do is worship. It's going to be one long church service. That is so false. There are more ways to glorify God than just church service. Don't we know that here on earth? That you glorify God with your work as we will work in heaven. Your creations as in heaven. Your relationships as in heaven. All these shadows of things that point to heaven and what it'll be like. And that leads me to my third point. Looking there. The assurance of heaven through biblical reinforcement. I'm going to attempt, in my human ability, to give you a glimpse of heaven. Because I want you to be excited for it. Like children with glee. And if we don't, then too many of us will have unbiblical ideas of what it is to be in heaven. I'm going to spend next week talking about the nitty-gritty, I already told you. But right now, I want to build up a little foundation of heaven. Heaven often sounds overly spiritual. Like, heaven's out there. I was going through YouTube, and that's where all the theologians go. And there's AI-generated visuals of heaven. And I was like, I mean, it's pretty, but is it just an empty cloud with golden staircases? I definitely hope not. It's got to be more than that. And I think so often that's our vision of heaven. This locked up gate, and we enter it, and there's babies with wings. I don't know. I'm curious, how do you guys picture heaven? How many of you believe that it's a far-off place? The eternal heaven, I should say, because there are two heavens. There's a heaven that exists right now, which is in the third heaven, what Paul calls. So we have the atmosphere, we have space, and then we have the third heaven, which is invisible, right? Unless God opens up our eyes to see it. But what will the eternal heaven be like? I always make it hard to interact. I don't know if it's my personality or the way I dress, but you guys can speak. Golden roads? Yeah, but that's boring. We have golden roads here. In movies, at least. Trees with different fruits on it. Absolutely. How many of you are excited to be vegetarians in heaven? How many of you think we'll eat meat in heaven? All right. How many of you want to eat meat in heaven? Like a good Jesus-cooked steak? I hate to break it to you, but most likely, I'm like 99% sure that we will not eat meat in heaven because there will be no death in heaven, that we will coexist with animals. They're not going to be living in fear in heaven. With our supernatural bodies, like, they have no chance. You know? So, I don't think, and we'll get into that again next week, but the present heaven will not be far away. What God plans and what He wants to do and what He's opened up in the scriptures is that He wants to redeem the earth. He wants to buy it back and restore it. He wants to remake it. He wants to exterminate evil from it and build up heaven on the new earth. So, how does this work? Revelations 21, verse 1 through 3. And this is John, and I'm just going to read it to you out loud. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adored for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be His people. And God Himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. Anthony Hakima wrote this, that the New Jerusalem does not remain in a heaven far off in space, but it comes down to the renewed earth. There the redeemed will spend eternity with God. So heaven and earth that's now separated will then be merged. The new earth will also be heaven, since God will dwell there with His people, like His original plan. God could have taken Adam and Eve to visit heaven, but what did He do instead? He came down to Adam and Eve, and He walked with them. That was the original design. Likewise, hell will also be relocated, thrown into the lake of fire. So what this is saying is that the New Jerusalem will descend on the earth here, that will be destroyed and remade. And we will dwell here, and God will be with us. And some people believe that the New Jerusalem will levitate above earth in some way, but there's no evidence of that it's connected. Can you imagine if we went through all of this? We had separation with God for years and years and years, ever since Adam, and then God, in His ultimate plan for us, keeps us separate again. It would be super bizarre. It would be weird if He has a separate heaven and we're down on earth. No, He wants everything to be united. Ephesians 1:10 says, For I have given rest to the weary and joy to the sorrowing. At the right time, He will bring everything together under the authority of Christ, everything in heaven and on earth. That's the ultimate truth that we need to understand. That heaven will be so much like earth because it'll be a redeemed earth. And if we think about all the words that describe salvation and God's plan of redeeming, they're all like this: to reconcile, to restore, to recover, to return, to renew and regenerate, to resurrect. All of these implying that it will be remade, not something new and totally something we can't picture. Just like he will remake us and resurrect us, so will he remake and resurrect the earth. So it's not that hard to imagine what we'll be doing on the new heaven, the new earth, what it's called. We'll be eating and drinking, dancing. I know some of you are excited. Will we have fashion? Yeah, there's plenty of passages in the Bible that talk about the heaven, people being clothed. It'll be a physical realm. People will have faces. If Jesus in his resurrected form had hands and feet and you could see him, you could see his scar, would not our new heaven be a physical realm? And actually, so many passages of the Bible point to the heaven being the original and earth being a shadow of heaven. That everything we know, mountains and valleys and water and river, that everything is just like a mirror of heaven. Only we get the worst version of it. Because we've ruined it. We have to work by the sweat of our brow just to feed ourselves. We spend most of our lives feeding ourselves, protecting ourselves. But in heaven, our work will be free of that burden, and it will be something we enjoy. And when we eat, it's not because we're dying of hunger. We're already satisfied. It's something that we're learning to taste and enjoy in its purest forms. And our relationships, we're not just going to live in our individual mansions and never talk to each other. We're going to go out and celebrate. We're going to play games, chess, something. There's going to be events where we compete. Hopefully not volleyball. Something like it, right? And we will serve one another. You'll never be bored. Imagine God in all the stories, the greatest author of any, what am I talking about? Like the only greatest author ever. Nothing to compare him to. And he's going to have adventures for you. He's going to let you build whatever you want in your garage. And you can go blow it up. I don't know. Not only that, but you won't have fear. And you're like, well, is excitement going to be gone? Because there's no risk. And no, there's answers for that too. And I want to dig into it, but there's not enough time. Anyway, I was reading on YouTube. This is the perfect analogy of it. This guy says, yo, can't wait for the new map to drop. Earth chapter 7, season 8, it's going to be lit. That's what it is, kind of. That we'll experience a resurrected earth with all the places you've wanted to see in your lifetime, but now you get to go with the people you love. And you get to make something there. And it won't be crowded. You have all eternity. You can wait till no one's there. I don't know. But there will be no pollution or greed or exploitative people. If you loved painting in this life, imagine how you would enjoy painting there. If you loved board games or making people laugh, imagine making Jesus laugh. Nice. If you enjoyed science or technology, if they fascinated you, if there's something you enjoyed in this life, take the sin and corruption away from it and imagine it in heaven. Not everything will exist the same. For example, we'll go over, will there be marriage? Will there be sex? Will there be angels that you can talk to? Absolutely. Will there be pews? Will there be pews? Yeah, there will. Yeah, probably. Okay, if we read about Jesus seated at the right hand of God, yes, it could be more metaphorical, but it could also, I don't think we're going to stand the whole time in heaven. I don't know. I wish I had more time to dig into a lot of these things, but I do want to leave you with a quote by A.A. Hodge. And he says, "Heaven, as the eternal home of the divine man and of all the redeemed members of the human race, must necessarily be thoroughly human in its structure, conditions, and activities. Its joys and activities must all be rational, moral, emotional, voluntary, and active. There must be the exercise of all the faculties, the gratification of all tastes, the development of all talent capacities, the realization of all ideals, the reason, the intellect, the curiosity, the imagination, the aesthetic instincts, the holy affections, the social affinities, the inexhaustible resources of strength and power native to the human soul must all find in heaven exercise and satisfaction. Then there must always be a goal of endeavor before us, ever future. Heaven will prove the consummate flower and fruit of the whole creation and of all the history of the universe." It's a mouthful, but it's beautiful. Are you excited for heaven? All creation waits in eager anticipation. The worship team can come up. Do you ever feel, and this was a question posed, do you ever feel like the earth is groaning? Like the oceans are trembling? You guys don't feel that? The winds, what's happening right now in Florida, all of earth is waiting for resurrection. Not just earth, all of creation. The angels eagerly wait for God to do what he always wanted to do with us. Every season we watch the plants die and the animals hibernate. And every spring we await for life to come back. God almost wrote it in the code of the leaves that he designed. In the hills and the valleys, in everything. Creation wants redemption. God isn't abandoning the world he created. Instead, when he created it, he called it good. What he wants to do is buy it back. And he did that with the blood, with his begotten Son who died on the cross so that we could have this eternal life. How did the Christians, the martyrs, get through it all? They looked to heaven. They were excited. The suffering they endured compared not. And that is our calling, that we would be so excited for heaven that it's blurting out of us. That people ask us like, dude, where are you going? You don't care about anything, like, or you care so much about everything, but like nothing phases you. What are you so excited for? How many people I talk to in my work that are just so down on their luck, don't want to care about anything, on their third marriage and broken. This is how you evangelize. You tell them about heaven. It's not too late that as you have life now, as you have breath now, to decide not to be thrown around and swayed through this middle ground, but to choose heaven, where all will be well. There will be no tears, no sorrow, no pain. There'll be love. And how excited is the Father to greet you, who will see his children and he'll want to explore with them, to teach them, to answer their questions, to guide them, to watch them grow and love one another in this perfect place. There's no greater news than that.